Chris, it's hard to think about Alabama being kind of discarded off to the side. They are preseason top 5, but Georgia, Ohio State are getting the bulk of those are your national championship teams. That's going to be the national championship game. If somebody wants to look outside of that, they seem to be gravitating toward Oregon or Texas or some other spots. Is Michigan going to repeat? Can they retool and come back? Very few are giving Alabama that shot to be Alabama still. But this guy that's coaching them, I understand he's not won 7 national championships, but he took far less resources, far less talent, and made it to a national championship game. They do have a returning starting quarterback. They're finding guys like this Ryan Williams, a wide receiver, who's showing out in camp, who was one of the top wide receiver prospects in the nation. Are we discounting Bama too quickly?
Mark, it's really interesting because, to your point, when is the last time we came into a college football season where we'd get like this deep in conversation and not mention the Crimson Tide? I mean, that to me is the biggest difference. Like, it's the fact that we're having conversations about SEC football, and it's taking us 10, 15 minutes into the convo to talk about Alabama. And they're not the lead story anymore, right? With Georgia, with Texas, with Oklahoma. I mean, I remember, Mark, I was there at SEC Media Days in Dallas, and I think it was the Tuesday or Wednesday, that Steve Sarkisian and Kalen DeBoer spoke at Media Days. And typically when you'd wake up on Alabama Day, you would think you'd wake up and be like, oh, it's Alabama Day. I woke up that Wednesday, Mark, and my first thought, it's Texas Day. It's Steve Sarkisian Day. And, oh, by the way, Kalen DeBoer's kicking off the day. You see, so like that was just a totally different dynamic, obviously, in the thought process. Are we discounting Alabama too quickly? I mean, again, they're preseason top 5. So, I mean, I feel like they're getting respect. I feel like, if anything, Mark, Bama's getting, I don't think more respect than they deserve is the way to put it. I'm not saying that because I've got Bama at a 10-2 team and in the college football playoff, but they're definitely getting the benefit of the doubt that they're still Alabama. Now, there's tons of talent on that roster. They got one of the most talented rosters in college football still, Mark. You mentioned Kalen DeBoer. All he's ever done is win. I mean, 104-12. Why should we expect otherwise? I know this is a different beast, but why should we expect otherwise? So, I think Bama, maybe they are kind of flying under the radar, Mark, a little bit, flying under the radar, which I think could be a good spot for them, not having all the spotlight and the big expectations. They get to use that as a chip on the shoulder and try to prove the doubters wrong. So, Bama's not getting as much chatter, but flying under the radar in regards to being slept on to be, maybe they are from a standpoint of being a contender for the national championship, because I've seen no one pick Alabama to win it all. Nobody. It's either Georgia, Ohio State, maybe Oregon if you're trying to be crazy, maybe Ole Miss if you're trying to be different, maybe Texas, right? I've seen nobody pick Alabama. So, which again, though, Mark, I think is fair. Like, I think if you're just saying Bama is just going to just keep it going and they're gonna win it all, does the loss of Nick Saban mean nothing? I mean, it has to, Mark. He's the GOAT. He's the GOAT. Even as good as Kalen DeBoer may be, is he the GOAT? Is he that good? You talk to folks in Tuscaloosa, they think the coaching staff top to bottom is better than it was last year. Jalen Milroe back. Maybe some questions at wide receiver, but I think they've got some dudes there with Jeremy Bernard and Kendrick Law and God, his name's slipping my mind. Ryan, the 5-star true freshman wide receiver.
Ryan Williams.
There you go. We're forgetting the last name. They've got some dudes, I think, on the outside of the step. But offensive line's got to be better than defensively. They've got questions in the secondary, Mark. So I think there's more questions surrounding Bama than there ever have been before. But it's going to be a fascinating year one at Kalen DeBoer. But you have to think, as talented as they are, again, there's got to be some sort of step back. Even if it's minuscule, you lost the GOAT, right? So, I don't know. Bama's fascinating. I don't think anybody really knows what to expect from them.
So I'll take your last comment there. Nobody really knows what to expect from them, and I'm going to apply that to LSU. I want your thoughts on LSU. Brian Kelly, in a third season, you would think, well, LSU, they're already stocked. You're supposed to have one of the best coaches in the country. He should be ready to break through by year 3. And sure, he made an SEC championship game. And I would say that most observers that are reasonable say his first 2 seasons were basically par. He didn't do anything spectacular. He didn't underachieve. He hit par, but he's still building this roster. They lost so much talent at wide receiver. They lost a one-man Superman at quarterback. And even though Garrett Nussmeier should be capable, and then that secondary, I don't think it was one of the worst in LSU history last year. I don't know that it's been that much addressed to the extent to bring them up to a championship level team.
Mark, I will say, we actually about an hour ago dropped our LSU team preview, had the conversation with my guy Blake Ruffino of AYS Sports. Shout out to him. He's been at every single LSU practice. And again, it's fall camp, it's practice, right? Take it with a grain of salt. They're excited for the defense. They feel like the defense is going to be night and day better. And again, take it with a grain of salt. But my guy Blake is a straight shooter. I think he'd tell me if he thought it was going to suck. They're feeling the impact of Blake Baker very quickly. To your point, I agree. They've got questions defensively. I'm not expecting LSU to jump and be a top 25 defense in college football. But they think they could be a top 60 defense, which, I mean, when you think about how bad they were last year, that truly is night and day difference. So, LSU's got questions, Mark, from the standpoint of a brand new quarterback. How can the offense be better? It can't. Spoiler, it just cannot. It can still be really good, though. I think they'll be more balanced. Their quarterback's not going to have to rush for 1,000 yards, nor is he capable of doing so. Garrett Nussmeier, the biggest thing for him, limit the turnovers. They call him the Cajun Brett Favre because he loves to sling it all over the yard and put it in some tight windows. So, I think when it comes to Garrett Nussmeier, again, limited the turnovers. I think they've got playmakers on the outside despite losing Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. They've got guys like C.J. Daniels, Kyron Lacey obviously is back. Chris Hilton Jr. is a guy they're really high on. So they've got playmakers. They've got weapons. Caleb Jackson at the running back position, they're super, super high on him. I mean, they're really excited for him. So I think you're going to see – and then they got one of the best offensive lines in college football leading the way. So I think you're going to see LSU be a little more of a ground and pound type of offense. Don't put the ball in harm's way. So I think, Mark, LSU's a team. Offense takes a small step back. Defense takes a little bit of a step forward. What does that equal? I can tell you this, though, Mark, and I'm sure you've talked about this one. You better beat USC week 1. I mean, if you're LSU, you lose to USC week 1. You hate to say the season's over after one game, Mark, but that's not going to be a good sign. That's not going to be a good sign. I think it's a game LSU should win. I think it's a game they can win. I think it's a game they will win. I picked them to win it, but things can get squirrely, right? Especially if that defense is not where it needs to be. And we know Lincoln Riley, for everything he's not, he can dial it up with the best of them. So I think LSU, Mark, is right on the cusp. They're right on the edge. They're one of those college football playoff contenders in the SEC that a couple things click their way. And also, too, we got to talk about schedule again, Mark. They get most of their big games are at home. They do have to go to Kyle Field to play Texas A&M, but you get Ole Miss at home at night. You get Alabama at home at night. You get Oklahoma at home at night. And anybody who's been watching college football for longer than 5 minutes knows the significance of Death Valley at night. So, I've got LSU 10-2, Mark. I think they're capable of it. I think the defense will take a step forward. And I think offensively, as long as Garrett Nussmeier doesn't lose them ball games, doesn't throw them out of ball games, I think they got a great shot to make the playoff.